Welcome to the Beyond Ordinary Woman podcast. Every 2 weeks, we'll post a podcast version of one of our free training videos, but you can access them now at beyondordinarywomen.org. This episode or series includes downloadable information on our website, beyondordinarywomen.org. Go to Resources on the main menu and click on podcast/video extras. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to the Beyond Ordinary Women podcast. I'm Kelly Arabie, and today we are talking about best practices for women's Bible studies. Our conversation is with Dr. Kay Daigle. Kay has degrees from Dallas Theological Seminary and Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Kay, we met 25 years ago when we were both students at DTS. And as I recall, you were on staff with a large megachurch at the time, and I know that you have many years of experience in women's Bible studies. I know that over the years you've continued to write many studies, you participate, you lead, sometimes you teach, and you have done all these in various capacities over the years. We're going to get into talking about the how of best practices for women's Bible studies, but why do you have such a passion for this subject?
That's a really good question, Kelly. I have been so impacted by women's Bible studies in my life. I grew up in the church. I knew a lot about the Bible, but it wasn't until I got into adult women's Bible studies that I really began to grow and understand how the Bible fits together and really love it and experience really life change through being in God's Word more and knowing Him better. So that's why I have a real fervent desire that other people are able to get into good Bible studies also. I wanted to do this video because I've learned a lot through the years about what not to do, because when I started, nobody told me anything. So it was just a matter of trial and error and mostly error. And I hope to be able to help other women avoid having to go through error and learning the hard way what works.
I know when I moved to Dallas from a small town, and even when I went to seminary, I really didn't have a context for women's Bible studies in the same way that you did. I was not exposed to things like Bible study fellowship or precepts, and it really wasn't even until I joined Sue Edwards in a seminary internship did I experience Bible studies like you did. Could you describe a little bit of what that Bible study experience might look like for someone that doesn't have a background?
Well, sometimes it can feel overwhelming if you have no background, and that's one reason that following some best practices can help people feel welcomed and feel capable of studying the Bible, capable of communicating what they've learned and not feeling intimidated or like they just don't know anything and they don't want to talk. You know, there are just a lot of things that you can do practically to help someone new coming into Bible study.
What are some elements of Bible studies that you've done in the past, like small groups, homework, teaching?
I've done them all.
You've done it all.
I've done everything. I've taught studies that were very in-depth. You mentioned precept. I was in precept for years. I taught precept groups for years. I even did workshops for them, teaching people how to do precept studies. And then when I went on staff, well, even before I went on staff at a church, I was in a situation where the study that needed me was not a precept study. And so I began working with a more general women's Bible study that was a little more open to all women, or at least it made them feel open because they didn't feel like they were having to dig so much, and some didn't have the time or the inclination to do the kind of study that precept requires. And so that really then expanded when I was on church staffs because I was in charge of the women's Bible study. And so I was primarily concerned with the larger studies, the ones that would have a lot of different small groups. They all had small groups, but not just one. There were studies that had a teacher and small groups going on in the same study.
So as we get into talking about some of the practical how-tos, what is the why? What is the end game of Bible study? What's the goal?
The goal is discipleship. It is for us to grow in our knowledge and understanding of God. Yes, knowledge is important because if we don't know who God is, it's hard to trust Him. But it's also about walking with Him and trusting Him and knowing Him more and more and becoming more and more like Christ. So it has to have both elements. It cannot just be a knowledge-based study. If you're really talking about discipling people, it's got to have both elements, the element of knowing, but also the element of growing and becoming more like Christ.
So recently, I took my daughter to DTS to listen to women teach the Bible and was reminded of how powerful live teaching can be. What are your thoughts on the strengths of having women in your church teach versus a video series?
I think it's a much better option if you can have someone in your church who is doing live teaching. She is right there with you. She is part of your community. She knows what's going on in the church. But we do already have a full podcast episode and video on this topic. So I would really encourage someone, if you're wondering about that you would go to that particular study called Why Use Live Teachers, Not Videos. It's not a study. It's just simply something to listen to or something to watch if you want to do the video, and we have them both available. But primarily, I would say to disciple people and for people to be discipled, to have somebody who's live there in your church that you can watch, that you can get to know. To be a disciple of Jesus, you need some examples. And your small group leader is a wonderful example too. It doesn't have to be the teaching leader. But I think it's really great to have that live teacher. I think it's really helpful in growing. And as I think back on my own experience, having somebody teaching me just really made all the difference.
So practically speaking, I'm wanting to start a women's Bible study at my church. What are some elements that I need to be aware of?
Well, if you're trying to disciple people, certainly you might want to start with just a small group study. If you're in a small church, maybe you just need to start with one or two small groups and have discussion. But small groups are very important, as you know, Kelly. Really, I don't think you can grow to the same extent if you're not in a small group. So the small group is really essential, I believe. And if you have several small groups and they're all studying the same thing, then I think adding the live teacher really provides a depth that you can't have just from studying yourself, because the live teacher can help bring in the connections with the other parts of the scripture. She can talk about what the words meant, what the culture was believing. It just gives you a lot more context and understanding of the scriptures. And some scriptures are easier to do without a live teacher, but some are difficult if you really want to delve into them without having a live teacher. So I think those are two things that are important. And if you really are discipling people, I think you have to have the discussion before the live teacher, because really educational studies have proven that people learn better when they look at it themselves and discuss it with people. That is your primary mode of learning. It's not really listening to people. You might get excited about them. You might love what they have to say. You might feel really close to the Lord, but It's not going to stay with you. Those lessons, those truths are not going to stay with you from just listening to somebody in the way that they do. If you study it for yourself, but not only study it for yourself, but you have a group to discuss it, to bounce ideas off of, to get more understanding from, and to share what's going on in your life and how the scriptures apply to it.
I know that was pivotal for me in the first ladies' Bible study that I did. I was in a small group with about 12 women, and I facilitated the conversation. We had about 45 minutes to talk before a teacher came on stage and gave us a 30-minute message or so. But I also found, we grew during that conversation. I also found that my spiritual gifts came into play as I facilitated that conversation. I didn't know that I was gifted in that way. And it was through that small group experience and the fellowship of getting to know those ladies that God showed me that as well. I'm a huge proponent of small groups.
Well, what you just said, Kelly, about timing, I think if you really have discipleship as your goal, then you're going to put a little more time in the small group where people can really talk about life and the scriptures and how it works together, and less time with the teacher. And as a teacher, I can say that that's not really my favorite thing, is to shorten the teaching time. But it forces you really to go with what's really important. I think that that's better in the long run for women who are trying to grow as disciples, because they've interacted with people, than it is that I tell them a lot. Because the truth is, these educational studies have shown they just don't really remember. In a week, they won't remember the things that they'll think, oh, that was really a good lesson, but I'm not really quite sure. I don't even remember what she said. I just remember thinking it was good.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've left sermons or Bible studies feeling the same way.
Yes. And I recall one of the Bible studies that I enjoyed the most, one of those early studies. We probably discussed 6 or 12 questions in that 45-minute span every week. We probably had a good 6 or 10 questions that we did every day. And there were differing levels of engagement. There were some that were surface level questions. There were some that invited us to go even deeper. And we didn't always cover those digging deeper questions in our small group discussion, but boy, was it helpful for me when I was hungry and growing and had the time to be able to dig in deep. Those were really, really helpful.
Yeah, I've really found that too. And in most of the Bible studies I've written, I include some digging deeper questions, because I know I love to dig deeper, but not everybody does. Some people are, don't have time, or they just don't have the interest to dig deeper.
And season of life is certainly, sometimes people just have a certain amount of time to dedicate to that a week,
That's exactly right. So you want to be able to, that's the thing about, like, if you have one Bible study in your church, you have to be meeting the needs of women at different levels. You have to know that there are always going to be some women coming in who are brand new to Bible study, but there are also going to be women who have been Christians for 50 years, and they've been through the Bible many, many times, and you need to give them something that they can dig a little deeper in for themselves.
Agreed. What about evaluation? You get to the end of a study and you want to know how it goes. What have you learned about the evaluation process?
I think evaluations are essential, and I think something that's written that you actually hand out to them, you end up getting a larger percentage of the women answering it, because everybody's sitting at the table doing it together. And so even the women who are a little hesitant to fill out an evaluation will probably at least fill out part of it. So you get a much better cross-section. What I find is if you just leave it up to them, it's going to be the people who don't like things that are going to be sure and tell you. It's just the way it is. It's human nature for us to suggest things that can improve. And I always have those things on an evaluation, that there's always a question or two about how can this be improved? Do you have a constructive idea? And by asking if you have a constructive idea, I think it helps minimize maybe just complaining and whining, being written down on it. You can ask for their names optionally. You can ask. Some of them won't put it anyway. Or if you do ask for names, be sure that not everybody's going to see it. Like when I was teaching, I didn't want to see the names of the people who had written that they didn't like my teaching. It was just better for me not to know. So somebody else, an administrator of some kind, could read them, and then whatever the evaluations taught us, whatever the comments were, could be typed on another piece of paper. Part of the evaluation, as you do it on your computer, you can take those parts and then put answers under it and let everybody see what the answers are. I find that they're really helpful. And, we do have a document, an example of church-wide Bible study evaluation on our site, which might help if any of you want to create your own evaluation. It's an example that you can use. Another thing that you need to do, and this is really just very practical, make sure that if you want somebody to rank something like from 1 to something, don't do 1 to 5, because if they choose the middle, that doesn't really help you. You want something that's an even number, 1 to 4, 1 to 10, whatever you want to do, but it needs to be an even number so that you can say, are they more negative or more positive about this? That really helps as well. Another way that you evaluate that I found really important was debriefing with the small group leaders at the end of every study, because they are the ones who are with the women all the time, and they see what's working and not working. And if you're like me and you were teaching and you weren't even in a small group, you can't measure that yourself. You really need somebody who is listening to the women, talking to the women week after week. You need that debrief. And as the leaders meet together and debrief, it's even better, because somebody will say something and it'll help somebody else remember something that they want to say. So I think those are just real helpful.
So you've had responsibility in at least 2 churches that I know of for choosing and leading the women's Bible studies. How did you make decisions for which studies to do?
That's a good question. And I have certainly used other people's Bible studies. I haven't just used my own Bible studies. Knowing the women to a certain extent is really a help. I think it needs to be 1 or more people who actually kind of have a good handle on where this group is spiritually. I can think of a couple of different churches that I've been involved in Bible studies, and there are some churches that have a lot of women who have a lot of Bible knowledge, because the church is really strong on Bible teaching and verse by verse in the sermons. And then I've also been in situations where the women were very new to Bible study, had not been in Bible study a long time. Well, somebody needs to know those things, because you need to pick your material based on whether you feel like your group is ready for it. And the same thing is true of what you're going to study. You don't want to put a brand new group in a difficult book of the Bible. You want to start with the Gospels or something like that. The stories are an easy place to start and very helpful. I know that choosing something off the rack can be really hard, and I have definitely made mistakes in doing that. One time I was part of a team and we were teaching Romans, and we just made a mistake with what we chose. And part of the reason, amazingly, was that the women did not like it because there was a man who had written it and he just didn't seem to have any heart. It was a good question, but there didn't seem to be anything in it about yourself, about how you applied that. he just was coming from a different perspective.
It did not resonate with them.
He really didn't. And so I never did that again. As I said, I've learned a lot through error. The other thing that's difficult when you just pick it off the rack or, order it from anywhere is you've got to fit it into a certain number of weeks. But that's important. You need to pick something that will fit. Having something that lasts like a whole year is not really the best way to teach women. You need to pick something that will fit like in the fall, from the time school starts until Thanksgiving, and then start something else in January. And it could go through spring break. You could have a longer, more difficult book from January until about the 1st of May. So those are things that come into it. And I think doing some Old Testament, some New Testament, don't just do New Testament. Be sure they're understanding the Old Testament because it's the basis and foundation for what you learn in the New Testament. So those things are all part of how you make a decision.
I know you've also written some studies, and in the couple of decades that we've been doing ministry together, you've evolved a little bit in the way that you've done Bible studies.
That's true. That is true. Well, when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. So again, it was a lot of trial by error and learn by error kind of thing. I think I was trying to give them too much because, like I said, I had that precept background and we, dug so much. And originally, I think I was asking questions that were too complicated for the students. And so, I really kind of honed my questions and tried to ask good probing questions for application questions, really tried to hone that. And I would always have some fairly easy observation questions. If you know about studying the Bible, you've got observation, you've got
interpretation.
Thank you.
I go with observation, interpretation,
application. And you can't really just jump to application. And I think too many Bible studies are just they live in application. You need some struggling with the scriptures. The women need to have to deal with the scriptures themselves. They need to look at them and see what they're learning and what they're pulling out themselves on the study, not just application. But I went to some training for orality training, which means telling the Bible orally, teaching the Bible orally. And I actually spent a couple of mission trips trying to teach women how to tell the stories of the Bible. And that training really helped me because I got some good open questions that people were very interested in answering and that you could use over and over with any group, really, because they were so open that it allowed people to do that. But that works best when it's a story in the Bible because the questions can be more similar, although I generally add, more that, there's always something more to add other than those same questions all the time. But part of that was why I changed the way that I was studying. And I used to do 5 days of homework, and now I just do 3 sections of homework just because I think a lot of people felt like 5 was too much and that 3 was a little bit more doable for people.
I like sections versus days as well. It just seems more realistic and organic than having to feel as though you have to check off a box of day 1, day 2, day 3.
Right. And you tell them right from the start. You can do them all at the same time if that's what works into your week. Right. And if not, you have some divisions and you can break it up a little bit. So it's a little bit more user-friendly, I think.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to add or make sure our audience knows in terms of best practices for Bible study?
I would say you need to choose and train your small group leaders well. They're really the the foundation of making sure that this is a discipleship thing. And I think groups need to be together for a while. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think groups need some time to get to know each other. If they're really going to dig in and learn and grow, they need to feel comfortable with people. And that usually takes several weeks before they get there. And if you have like a 10-week, that's probably too long, 8-week study for the fall, and it takes 4 weeks for them to start feeling comfortable with each other, you really don't get very far as the personal relationships and that feeling of being discipled and growing together. So I think staying together is a really good thing. I'm sure you can overdo it where groups been together so long that they're really not making any progress anymore and they need some new blood. But if you're doing a large women's Bible study at a church, there's going to be in and out anyway. People are not going to come back every semester, and it allows you to bring some new people in.
Right. I think definitely being together for a year is a good practice. And some of the small groups that I've been a part of, there may be no more than 12 or 16 people around a table. I like facing one another. I like face-to-face conversation, sitting around a round table. That's just my preference versus a classroom type setting where you're, in rows facing a teacher. I like also just the capacity of being able to get to know each other over multiple semesters. But it is important to keep space and create space for new people to come in. We don't want them to feel like they don't fit in or that they're trying to break into a clique. That's a difficult thing as well. Really depends on the size of the church and the size of the study.
It does, because I've been in studies where you had to move in order for everyone to be together. You couldn't stay at your little tables necessarily. But I too believe in tables. I think that is really fosters communication and sharing much better than even a lengthy table. You can't see each other as well, and certainly not in rows. Another thing that I think is important, if you're going to disciple, I think it's great to have multiple ages in the same group, a mixed group, so that you have some older women who have been there and younger women who may just be starting their careers or starting their homes, and they really appreciate the wisdom of older women. The first Bible study wasn't quite the first Bible study that I ever led, but it was almost the first Bible study that I ever led. There were some older women in it, and I was, in my 30s and early 30s, and they were so wise. I mean, they would just share things about their lives that I was just in awe of. And one of them had a particularly hard life. She'd gone through many, many struggles. And one of them, her son had committed suicide, which that was devastating for her. And yet she was such a positive person and talked about how she'd leaned on the Lord, how she had trusted Him through this really hard time. So I wasn't going through anything really hard at the time, but she taught me that whatever I went through, God would be there and that I could make it through with Him. And I learned that from her because she was in that group with me. And you really can't learn from older women if you don't have situations where you're mixed with them for more than one day. It doesn't work to just go volunteer someplace for one day. This has to be a relationship where these people, and over time you learn from them. And I think it's just really important. But I have found that it is not good to just stick one young woman in with a bunch of older women, or one older woman in there with a bunch of younger women, because they also want a friend. They want other people their own age too. So I think you have to put at least 2 or 3. If you're going to put young women in a group with older women, you need to put 2 or 3 of them. And the same is true of older women with younger women. So those are just kind of practical things that I think help. And, I was talking about having the teaching at the end. The other reason you want to have the teaching at the end is if it's at the beginning, whether it's a video or a live teacher, if it's at the beginning, they'll go to the small group and they'll just talk about what she said instead of what they learned themselves and by doing their homework and their time with God.
Right. I also had a thought about just small group questions. I know we have videos on our website, and we're going to point people to other videos and resources about small group discussion. But everybody seems to have the experience or the question in a small group discussion. What do you do with the people who talk a lot? You have sometimes two extremes, those who talk a lot and those who don't speak at all. Is there anything that you would like to say to that in the small group facilitation or discussion?
A long time ago, when I was at Northwest Bible Church and I was the women's minister there, I wrote a handbook for small group leaders. And it is on Bible.org still under my name, Kay Daigle. And that talks about many of the possible scenarios that you could go through by having a group. I will say that personally, I don't really believe in calling on people and forcing them to talk. I think if you've got a quiet woman, you need to just let her be quiet if she's uncomfortable speaking up and hope that eventually she will. You can encourage her, after the group. I hope you'll have more to say next week. We'd love to hear what you have to say. I know that God is speaking to you and would love to hear it. Right. But you don't want to put them under so much pressure that they don't ever come back. If they're uncomfortable, if they've never been in a Bible study, or they just feel like everybody knows more than they do, they may not talk for quite a long time. But if they keep coming, that means they want to be there. That means they want to hear what other people have to say. And if you have some sharing time, getting to know you time at the beginning, they will have talked then. And if you have that kind of thing other times, maybe a time when the group gets together outside of the small group, and you maybe have a question that you ask everybody, then she'll maybe become more comfortable talking. One thing that helps with somebody who talks a lot, and I just experienced this morning, somebody who talks a lot, if the small group leaders are sitting right across from her, you end up looking at her a lot, and so she feels real comfortable talking. So put yourself next to her where you don't look at her at all unless you really, want to. And that does help a little bit. It also helps if you just say, not everybody's shared today. I'd like to hear from somebody who hadn't had anything to say, or somebody who hasn't spoken much, and hope that somebody else will talk. Because people in the group can get tired of just hearing the same person all the time. They want to have a chance to talk themselves. And if somebody talks too much, that's very hard. But Kelly, you have a great series here on our BOW website at beyondordinarywomen.org. You did a series with me on leading a small group towards spiritual growth, which is really what we're talking about, something more than just knowledge, but spiritual growth. And I would really encourage people to watch or listen to that series.
Leading small groups is sometimes a skill that's developed over time. I haven't been part of a small group that was together for more, a couple of semesters, that someone who was quiet didn't eventually feel comfortable sharing their heart, sharing their story. Safety needs to be established in a group. Trust needs to be established in a group. But I feel like, and my experience has been that most women will open up in a small group setting that feels genuine. And it's really a beautiful thing to see. We do have a lot of resources. You mentioned the small group series, Leading a Small Group Towards Spiritual Growth. I would just also encourage our audience to look at our website, beyondordinarywomen.org. We have many more videos, many more resources on women's Bible study, and we have many leadership resources. Go to our website, beyondordinarywomen.org, and click on Resources tab. Then there's a drop-down that shows you podcast and video extras. You can search for this video, Best Practices for Women's Bible Studies, and all of the resources that Kay has mentioned will be available at that spot as well. So we encourage you to look at that. Kay, it's been a delight to be with you today. It's always fun to get to visit. Thank you.
It is, Kelly. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. We will see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond Ordinary Women podcast. You can find more podcast episodes and resources for women in leadership by going to beyondordinarywomen.org. This podcast is produced by Beyond Ordinary Women Ministry. Our production team includes Evelyn Babcock, Kay Daigle, Deborah Herring, and Sharifa Stevens. Theme music, Back in Stride by Don Miller, used courtesy of Christine Miller.